system here in Chattanooga. Chattanooga is very prone for industry. Because of the railroad system that was here, it's usually pretty easy to get supplies in Chattanooga. Once the supplies are made into products, usually either those finished products out of Chattanooga. So Chattanooga very naturally grew up as a very industrialized city. Especially just before the Civil War, industry was really starting to take off here. The railroad system was really starting to come into its prime. Once the Civil War started, the Confederate Army kind of used Chattanooga as a main hub. Because that railroad system kind of ran from the from the Atlanta area to the Kentucky-Alabama area, ran right through Chattanooga. Chattanooga kind of became that central part of their supply line. Very vital to the Confederate Army. One of the reasons why the Union Army said, if we want to win this war, we need to take over Chattanooga. Once the Union Army did take over Chattanooga, they ended up using Chattanooga as their launching point for the invasion of the South, their march towards Atlanta. Once the Civil War was over, a lot of those Union soldiers came back to Chattanooga for a couple reasons. One, Chattanooga had always kind of been a very Union-friendly city. They figured they'd be welcome back here. But two, they saw the potential for growth. They saw industry was taking off here before the war, how easy it was to get supplies and products in and out of Chattanooga during the war. They figured they came back to Chattanooga, reinvested into this city, they'd be able to make a lot of money. And they were correct. Over the years, industry grew and grew and grew. And by the 1950s and 1960s, Chattanooga had become one of the top 10 most industrialized cities in the United States. It was booming here. Just in the downtown area, there were probably over 100 different factories working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was great here. Businesses are making money, factories are making money, all the shops around town were making money. Unemployment, pretty much non-existent. Everybody had a job that wanted a job. So everything was going really good here in Chattanooga. Everything except for one thing. What is the byproduct of all of these factories making their products? Pollution, waste, smog. The pollution and waste during the 1950s and 1960s here in Chattanooga was horrendous. On a normal day, those mountains behind us right there, you couldn't see those mountains. There was so much haze and smog in the air. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I might actually be driving around with my headlights on because it was so dark out. People would do their laundry in the morning, hang it out to dry. By the time it was done drying in the afternoon, half the time it was dirty when you started with it. So it was terrible here. People were dying of emphysema. It was nasty. Well, then in 1969, some of you guys remember this name, famous CBS Evening News reporter by the name of Walter Cronkite. Walter Cronkite in 1969 came in the CBS Evening News called Chattanooga the dirtiest city in America. Once Walter Cronkite called Chattanooga the dirtiest city in America, the U.S. government got involved. The U.S. government sent people down here to investigate and see what's going on. Once they get down to all these factories working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they're like, there's your problem. Look at all this pollution. We need to do something about it. All you factories that are working 3 shifts a day, we need you to cut it back to 2 shifts a day. We need to reduce the production so we can reduce the pollution. So they did. They started getting these factories that are cutting back on their production. Well, that reduced the pollution about that much. Didn't do a whole lot for the pollution, but if you had a 3rd shift job, you're unemployed. All of a sudden that unemployment rate started to go up here in Chattanooga, the production rate started to go down, the pollution still pretty much remained about the same. So the government stepped in again and started getting these factories that are cutting back on more production. Now, what happens to a factory when it's not making a whole lot of products? It's not making any money, shuts down, goes bankrupt, moves.